Welcome to PCOM Perspectives, where we discuss news, events, research, and other topics impacting our campuses and communities. Join us as we share our PCOM perspectives. Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Dr. Jay Feldstein, and today we're talking with Dr. Brian McDonough, medical editor at KYW Newsradio and designated institutional official and chairman of Graduate Medical Education Committee at St. Francis Hospital in Delaware. As medical editor at KYW Newsradio, Dr. McDonough has been providing the Philadelphia region with daily health tips for over a quarter of a century. He has written 4 books and is the recipient of 4 Emmy Awards during his 20-year career with Fox Television. A member of the Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame, he has also been named the Jules Bergman Award winner, the National Medical Broadcaster of the Year, and has earned this prestigious Walter Alvarez Award for science writing. In addition to his broadcasting career, Dr. McDonough continues to practice medicine as a clinical professor of family medicine at Temple University and serves as Chief Medical Information Officer and Chairman of the Family Medicine Department at St. Francis Hospital in Delaware. Dr. McDonough has been named AAFP Physician of the Year and is a Fellow of the American Academy of Family Physicians, the College of Physicians of Philadelphia, and an ACPE Certified Physician Executive. He also serves on the advisory committees for the Society of Teachers of Family Medicine, the American Academy of Family Physicians, and the American Medical Association. Today, Dr. McDonough and I will discuss his experience as a medical journalist in the digital era, preventing the spread of health misinformation, and his biggest life lessons mentoring resident physicians. Welcome, Brian.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It'll be great to talk.
No, it's a pleasure for me because I've been listening to you for over 25 years on KYW. So it's a real treat for me, and it's going to be a real treat for our audience today. So I have a couple of questions for you. I guess the first one is, how have you seen the media landscape evolve in your near 4 decades when you've been a reporter?
Wow, it's really changed. When I first got into it, there were just very few outlets. I had to work like crazy just to get on one of them. And then that moved into television where I was able to get a TV opportunity. And for a long period of time, I mean, in the Philadelphia area, there were essentially 4 stations on television that did news. KYW was essentially the only all-news station. In fact, it still is on radio. And there was no such thing really as the internet. Computers were just these huge parts of buildings. I mean, you had, that spit out little cards. So that's what we thought of it. And as technology evolved, a lot of the work I did, in a sense, got easier to do and harder. It was easier because there's so many more outlets, and so it can be done so much faster and efficiently. And we can sit here in studios in our own offices and do things. But the other side of the coin is anybody can get out there. So it becomes more challenging because you want to be accurate. You want to make sure you're balanced. And at the same time, you have to really juggle a lot of misinformation that we're now seeing. So I think it's great. I think the more voices, the better, but it does bring challenges. And that's what I've seen, the change as we head into the digital age. Somebody told me a joke once. They said, it'll be great when we have more than 4 television stations. There'll be so many great programs to choose from. And then they said, we have thousands of them, but there's still not anything to choose from. And it was funny, but it's kind of true that, we still kind of limit it with what we have, and we all grab onto something that we enjoy or something we hear, but lots of voices.
Yeah, that leads me to my second question. As both a journalist and a medical professional, how do you navigate the spread of health misinformation where there's so much of it today on social media and increased distrust of media sources? And I'll have to unfortunately include the government right now.
I will tell you where I first noticed it. I mean, it was always there. I mean, when I was doing news stories, there were still people trying to present one opinion, and you tried to listen. And back in those days, if you did a story, you wanted to have balance, somebody in favor of something, somebody against it, and you would present the overall story and let the viewer or listener make their decision. And to a large extent, traditional news still does that. But with the expansion of stations, the expansion of the internet, everyone has a voice, which is good, but those trying to make money need to do more and be more outlandish to get an audience. And you've seen the evolution of the cable news stations, quote unquote news, where they're really talk stations and now trying to tailor themselves to specific audiences. So you may watch one network, which is, let's call it very liberal, one which is very conservative, or one which has this view, one has that. And if you're locked into one thing as a viewer, you're kind of locked into one view, and that may not be the best thing. In the old days, you might have disagreed, but there were just certain voices that tried to present everything. Now you have a lot of what I would say you can direct your viewing habits, your listening habits to those things that make you feel better. And that becomes problematic when you're talking about health. I first noticed it during COVID. I was getting very frustrated because there were certain things that I knew scientifically were true, and yet there were others, and with conflicting views. And that was the first time I ever really heavily got into social media. I started a podcast on radio, audio, called Coronavirus Today, and then went video with one called A Doctor in the Pandemic. Did something like 600 daily reports. But what I did was I refused to take sponsors. And my goal was that I will do this, but I'm not getting any money either way. I'm just trying to give you what I think scientifically is true. And I will tell you, they were very well received. I didn't get many people, threatening my life or screaming at me, because I tried to be respectful for all views. But you'll know this as a physician. The toughest part for me was I was seeing patients all day, and patients were dying, and I was getting, dressed in the garage and sleeping in the basement, trying not to bring anything home. And then here I was doing audio and video work in the free time, and it became almost all COVID all the time, which I think took a toll on me for a while, because I became totally absorbed, because that's all we had. And that was tough. And it taught me a lesson about balance, but it also taught me ways to listen to other people. So if somebody tells me something outlandish, like right now we're dealing with measles,
Right.
and I know how the vaccines work, and I know the science of the vaccines, but there's many people out there who question it. So I could attack them and say, you don't know what you're talking about. Or I can say, listen, here's the way I understand it. Here's the way I think it's good. And if you trust me, why would I hurt you? And I try to go with that approach. And it works, but it doesn't always work.
So I guess that leads me to my last question. What are the biggest trends you're seeing in today's resident physician through your role at St. Francis?
Well, my role has changed. You mentioned earlier where I was chairman, and I did step down from that position to become chairman of graduate medical education. And most importantly, I'm now totally in the clinical world when I'm there. So I've taken the administrative work, which it has its own challenges and obligations. And for the first time in my career, I'm just doing medicine and obviously my media work. And it's been really fun to teach, but also really important to get into their heads. And I will tell you, I'm very optimistic about our young physicians. I'm very optimistic about their inclusiveness. I'm very optimistic about the fact that they want to help other people and they want to learn. And those same skills that probably when we started that made the best doctors, I always thought were, wanting to learn and caring about others. And if you have those two things, I don't care what world you're in, you see that. The thing that I'm trying to teach them at this point in my life is trying to show them that medicine can be fun and it's rewarding. Like I will tell them, I'm going on 4 decades of this, and like you don't do something that long if it isn't something that is rewarding. At an early point in my career, about I guess 10, 15 years in, an opportunity I was doing the Today Show on weekends, but to just pure network, go to the Sanjay Gupta, Dr. Oz, whatever route. And I had to make a decision at that point. And I remember talking to my dad, he was alive at the time, and I said to him, what do you think? And he said, well, I think you have an obligation to society, but you've done it long enough, you've fulfilled that obligation. It's got to be what you want. And I'd like to say that I'm this giving person who wanted to get back to society, but I think the reason I chose the path I did and continue patient care is I loved it. Like it was fulfilling for me because I felt it made a difference. And that's what I try to teach the residents. And when I see it in them, it's very rewarding. When I see them, you know, see the joy they get out of making somebody's life better, it makes me feel better. And I think that takes all the other stresses that you might have in a career like this and makes it worthwhile. I think the only other thing I'd add, Jay, is that I think what I keep telling them is you're doing this for so many years and you still learn something new or several things new every day. And you go, how the heck can I be doing this all day, every day, and still not have known that? And I try to tell them that because they're so frustrated because they're at the beginning. And I go, you just got to keep reading. You just keep learning. You just can't stop. And that's what's tough about this career, but also what's so rewarding.
Totally agree. I mean, we're all perpetual students in medicine.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you a question. Like you've transitioned from a practicing physician and you've taken on a not just an administrative role, but a leadership role. I mean, I did some of it, but you really are with an incredible responsibility. How do you deal with that? Because that's a tough transition.
You know, it was a tough transition because I transitioned first to the insurance industry world and did that for close to 15 years and then came here. The biggest transition for me was getting to understand the whole ecosystem in healthcare. And then we tend to, oh, the insurance is the world is the evil empire, you know, and every physician's an angel. Well, it doesn't work out that way, you know, and everybody basically, we're all trying to do the right thing. And we're all trying to take care of the patient within a context of some economic constraints, especially in the insurance world. And one of the things I realized I missed was I missed clinical medicine. I mean,
Mhm.
I, like you, love medicine. That's why I'm still in it. I still read as much as I did when I was practicing. I still read my journals. But you get to a point where you think you can volunteer like once a week or once a month at a free clinic or whatever, but your clinical skills really aren't up to par. And that was really hard for me to give that up and recognize I listen, I just can't do this anymore for the benefit of the patients. You know, I'm not giving the best care I could possibly give. So that was the hardest part of the transition, quite frankly.
It becomes so much of your identity, and then all of a sudden you're sacrificing that. What about the fact that you have all that experience and now you're leading an organization? Does it give you a better understanding of what the different physicians and other providers are going through?
The one thing, you know, from a medical student perspective, I try and drill in them, you know, and I'll give public health or policy lectures that if you keep the patient first, if you just keep your focus on the patient first, things will take care of themselves. You know, you can never do the wrong thing if you're doing the right thing. And it's about the patient. That's why we're all here. That's why we all became physicians. You know, the ER and the administrative world in health insurance was very helpful because it's a team sport. When you're working in the ER, you're a team. When you're working in a large corporation, you're working in a team. And now in a leadership role, I've got my executive team. And you can't do it all by yourself. You can't clone yourself. And you've got to hire good people. You've got to trust them and you've got to let them do their jobs. And that's basically the experience I brought with me to the organization. You know, I had a lot of direct reports when I was in the insurance world in a larger organization, quite frankly. But the leadership values and my style kind of have always stayed the same. And as a physician, a really good physician, you learn how to listen because you and I both know 90% of the diagnosis comes from the history. The other 10%, is the physical exam and the diagnostics. And being a good listener is key to being, I think, a successful leader and executive.
No, I think they're great points. It's funny, we do interviews like this, and I always say to people, I talk about myself because that's your part you contribute. But the fun part of the interview is talking to the other person, hearing what they have to say because you learn so much. And you said something I think that's really true, which it's really important too, is the aspect of listening in healthcare. Because I will tell my residents the exact same thing. I mean, go in there and talk to them. I say, you'll notice I talk about what they do in their life. frankly, I'm interested. I want to know what a plumber does. I want to know what an electrician does. I want to know what a teacher does. But I'm doing it also because they're more comfortable, and then they start to tell you what's wrong. And then they tell you what's wrong with them rather than coming in and saying, says you have this, and start firing off the questions. What you do is they'll end up telling you, everything was fine, but Tuesday this started to happen. And before you know it, I mean, you don't have to be a genius. You just go, oh, I know what's going on. And you're able to help. And that's listening, and that is the 90%. And you mentioned that with administrative. Now, my work, when I took a VP role, it was after all those years of clinical work. I was still trying to do clinical, like you said, but I was in charge of putting in basically the electronic health record, which was epic in our system for our region. So I had all these people under me and all these things, and talking to the physicians about the pros and the cons. But you don't want me changing the ink in a computer. I mean, I'll screw it up, but I understood the idea of what we were trying to achieve. And then the people who could change the ink, and far more than that, were the people who really went and did everything. But you had to have that vision. And that was the little part I contributed, because I was thinking, what would doctors want? Or what, this isn't really going to help in the care of a patient because the nurses are being shut out, or whatever it was, and then that's where I would kind of contribute. But all the other stuff, now that I'm back clinical, I'm using the tools that I put in, and my residents are telling me how to use it half the time because they're 30 and they know it a lot better than anybody our age can. So it is interesting how you say that.
Yeah, they're raised on technology that we didn't have.
Yeah, I remember my kids. My 3-year-old was playing. It's that Oregon Trail game that they all played. They all died from dysentery on the trip, and they all played that game. But they were playing basically CD-ROM games when they were 4 and 5, and they were raised on that. You take them 15 years later, and they don't read instructions. They just turn things on and work them. And that's where, again, your point, as a team, they're the doctors who, they don't just tell me that, but I can learn from them as I'm teaching them some of the stuff we do. I might still go, hey, don't forget the physical exam. I know that seems archaic, but there's a real value to listening to someone's heart, those kind of things. From your spot, and you are at a spot where you really can see it, what do you see as the future of medicine? Are you optimistic?
You raised the issue earlier. I'm optimistic because of the students. The students, the medical students today, and all healthcare young professionals today in training, they make me optimistic because their hearts are in the right place and they want to make society better and they want to do a good job. And I mean, we can talk about, what's the impact of AI on medicine, what's the impact on financial models, the technology, genetics, precision medicine. I mean, everybody talks about that, but at the end of the day, it's always going to be, I hope, the doctor-patient relationship, and that's based on trust. And that's probably the most important thing that you will not be able to get without an individual person. We talk about, AI, who was it, Bill Gates, that AI is going to replace physicians. But it's going to be different. It'll be more technologically based, and delivery will be where the patient wants it, whether it's home, whether it's virtual, whether it's, at a doctor's office, whether it's work. But the one thing that I would like to see changed, I've been involved on the payer side for a long time. And I've been on the Physicians Technical Advisory Committee, which was a congressional work group to look at alternative payment models. We've spent the last 50 years trying to figure out what's the best way to pay for healthcare. And we've spent no time on figuring out what's the best way to prevent these chronic diseases as opposed to how to pay for them. And I really hope that we get more preventative education and care built into the system. I always maintain we'll never have true healthcare reform until we figure out a way to pay people more to keep people healthy than to take care of them when they're sick. So hopefully we get some of that moving forward.
Now that is such a great point, because no one dreams of being in the hospital. They dream of being home. They want they want to be healthy. They want to have more time with their family and more time with their hobbies. They don't want to be sick. And you're so right. A lot of that is lifestyle and what we're doing and how we're affecting people. We talked about COVID a little bit. My biggest concern with COVID, there was a point we had to shut down the country. I felt to stop this spread of, we didn't even have a vaccine. But I also have worried and continue to worry about the combination of the isolation with kids and the fact that they're also isolated by the technology now, that there's so much more anxiety, so much
Oh,
more
without a doubt.
depression. There's not the the people interaction that would give you that, and and I know that just adds to stress. Stress adds to poor diet. It adds to bad behavior. It it increases inflammation in the body, which starts, and we're going to see things, I think, in 30-year-olds that we used to see in 50-year-olds. And that concerns me a lot.
No, I agree with you. I think we haven't seen the effects of COVID yet.
Yeah, the worst effects are yet to come. And yet at the same time, I think it's a challenge for medicine. To your point, we have to start providing care and providing care in a way that we're doing preventive care and helping people do better. So, but that's great to hear a person, in your position, because you have influences over so many that I think it's great that you're thinking that way too.
Well, thank you. Well, Brian, I really appreciate you joining us today and for your commitment to serving the Philadelphia region as a trusted source in healthcare reporting. I'm Dr. Jay Feldstein, and this has been PCOM Perspectives.